you very much, and I'm really glad you mentioned not creating solutions to problems that don't exist, because that is something we're going to be, well, hopefully not focusing on, but at least touching on this afternoon in our technologies of the future panels. But since this is about the workplace, I have had some quite specific questions sent to me. Let me just look at this first one here, which is primarily directed at you, Paul, but I think all our panelists could probably take a chance at it. It's how do you make sure that people are more autonomous, but that there's still an interoperability and a sort of a unification of purpose in the workplace?
God, that's a difficult question to start with. How do you make people feel autonomous? I suppose what you do, if you take an example from somebody like DHL, they've delivered a range of services to their front line. So these digitally disadvantaged people are now getting knowledge and data that they never would have got. So the level of empowerment for that front line of the organization has grown a great deal. And I think it's a question of trying to make that happen as broadly across the organization as possible. I know inside my own company, when we got rid of our offices, strangely, the company became more intimate because there was nowhere that people felt excluded from. So actually, I wrote a thing around digital fika. And fika is a Swedish word for kind of chit-chat over cake and coffee. And it's really the idea of how do you create some level of what I think of as digital intimacy or trust through a universality of knowledge.
Laurent?
Well, I mean, we could spend the day discussing about how to help people to be more autonomous, but I would just mention two. First, treat them as adults, which means get rid of all those rules that are there only to belittle them and to make them feel like infants. And if you treat them as infants, they will also behave as infants. That's one thing. The other one is to create what Ricardo Semler calls the why way, which is an environment in which anybody can question what the organization is doing, its objectives, the way it does it, etc., and does not feel threatened if he challenges its hierarchy by asking questions.
Well, I mean, we're sort of speaking about sort of quite agile, modern organizations. I mean, is there a particular challenge in something like the European Parliament for this balance between autonomy and unification?
I think we have to be aware. I think of roads. The technology behind building roads has come on leaps and bounds. We don't notice it because we drive on it and we're inside the car that we're driving on. But the technology and the support systems around those roads are absolutely vital. But that's not what most people do when they get in the car. They don't think about it. What they're thinking about is where am I going and how am I going to get there. So your job is to build those roads that actually enable people to do that. And in any job, in any workplace, people want to know that what they're doing is fulfilling for them, but actually, as you said, has purpose for the organization as a whole. It may not be that they're working in a big organization, but here, of course, in the Commission and the Parliament, they are enormous institutions, but the job that they're doing can be very small and very focused. You know, if you're the only person in the office of an MEP who's come from a small party from a small country, you're very, very focused. And what you want from your technology is something that helps you do that. So we all have different things. We want fulfillment in our work, and if, as you say, we can't get out of the door when we need to go for coffee, then that's going to be a hindrance, and we're not going to have that fulfillment. So it's an enabling process, I think, that technology should be doing for us.
I mean, Paul, to pick up also on something you said earlier, I mean, is there a fear factor as well with technology? Oh, the robots are going to take our jobs. I mean, something like the EU institutions, I mean, perhaps we're a little bit scared of something like auto-translate or these, you know, sort of taking over the jobs that humans have done. I mean, is it hard to get buy-in if there is that fear?
Well, I think that's a kind of, we live in a period of software displacing human beings, and we don't know what we're going to be left for human beings to do. So that is a societal, political issue. I mean, I wrote a blog post about 3 years ago, which is why robots should pay tax. And the idea was that when you replace an individual with software, they don't then feed the economy with the tax revenues. Now, so there are some very big issues around robotics. There is a level of fear, which we've always seen as technology replaces people. And I don't really have a solution to that, because the innovation is coming. But it's something that I certainly think at political levels and at society levels we have to be looking at, maybe experimenting with basic national income.
Well, I wonder, Lauren, if perhaps your idea of trust could be part of the solution.
I guess so. I mean, the best way to face the future is to be informed about it and to be part of the decision making, at least in the organization in which you work. And so basically self-governance is about that. When people know what might happen, then they are ready to develop themselves, to grow, and to work with technology. And that's what we have been doing for thousands of years. But once again, if you don't know and you feel the pressure is coming down on you and you don't know where it's going to come from, and it will be decided by some top people, then you are afraid and you cannot contribute very well.
Well, I also have another question, actually, for you specifically, saying, can you expand a little bit on that idea that we can only motivate ourselves that you mentioned in your presentation?
I guess that's something we all experience. It's very difficult to explain it further, but basically, there are many research that have been done, and McGregor and the likes, distinguishing extrinsic factors from intrinsic factors to motivate. Extrinsic factors are perks, salaries, promotion. It is demonstrated that they have some effect, but not very profound. On the other way, feeling that what you do contributes to a higher purpose is intrinsically motivating. And it creates a totally different engagement for you within the organization for which you work. And I think, if you reflect about yourself and your life experience, you will know that it's not rocket science to understand this. But obviously, still a lot of managers who have been brainwashed to believe they can control people do not understand it.
Okay, well, another question, I think for the whole panel, which is, how can we encourage digital self-governance and openness in a politically charged environment?
Yeah, the leaks. I'm not sure if anybody saw the newspapers from the UK this morning, and it's always about Brexit. But one poor lass had come out of a meeting in number 9 Downing Street and went into number 10 Downing Street, and she had actually written it down on her notepad, and she was walking like this, and the newspapers have picked it up with their long lenses, and they've got her notes from the meeting that she was coming out of. So it isn't just IT that is leakable. Actually, these days, just writing on a piece of paper is terribly risky for anybody in politics, because you have to keep the thoughts in your head. And of course, that is something, it comes into the security, and things move so fast these days. If you went back even 20, 30 years ago, that the politicians could sit in a meeting and talk and discuss and come to a conclusion and then come out and pronounce it. Now everybody wants everything so fast, and stuff gets leaked out in so many different ways from Twitter, and we can see what Trump is doing with his Twitter from his unsecure telephone, which isn't that what Hillary was supposed to be been accused of? But technology is wonderful and a wonderful tool. How we regulate it, how we deal down to and protect those people who need protection, who are not very savvy about it, is down to your software behind it. You know, it can be done to build that in so that you can't send anything, nothing will leak out unless you've got the things. And that is a real challenge for you, especially in institutions where you are making decisions about other people's lives around the whole of the European Union and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, the point, I think information and knowledge is opening up. And I think that is a relentless trend. And one of the things that I think is really important to think about in this is demographics. And I think one of the things that we haven't noticed, and it's relevant here, is that the demographic change that's happened this year, when you look at Brexit and Trump, is that young people predominantly voted to remain in the EU, in the UK, and to vote against Trump or for Clinton. So if you'd also had a level of online voting in both of those elections, completely different result. So we'd be sitting here with no Brexit and no Trump. Feel quite a different world. And the reason I mention this is that this demographics is essentially time is on the side of this openness and this more progressive approach. And so when you're thinking of the digital workplaces for your organizations, think about what the younger people, the 12-year-olds, the 10-year-olds are going to be expecting. And they're expecting this openness, this authenticity, this honesty. It has to be secure, but I think it's a really important shift. That was the point I kind of had in my notes I wanted to make sure I said before the panel ended.
One thing I think we need to deeply reflect about is the fact that algorithms and big data are moral machines. We don't look at them like this right now, or not enough. But if you think about it, they are moral machines in the sense that they include a vision of the world. The PageRank is not the same vision of the world as other systems like the liking, etc. The algorithm that present you information continuously. And this affects quite a lot politics. We've seen it with the US election. So we really need to take this into account. And there are obviously today people who are doing it. I was very impressed by the fact that the Pirate Party in Iceland is gaining a lot of credibility because they confront those realities. And I wish that all the parties would do the same.
Well, I hope you're around for after our coffee break. We have a specific panel on digital democracy where we will really delve into that. But I want to come back to sort of talk about, really stay with this idea of the workplace. And Paul, you mentioned it could take up to 30 different architects to create any one digital workplace. I mean, is that a challenge or is that a bonus or is it, you know, too many cooks?
Well, I think it is a challenge because I think even though we've all got used to working with so many different applications and we're used to a level of fragmentation, if you like, we're probably all working through different applications as we speak. So we've got a level of familiarity with that. On the other hand, we would rather move seamlessly through one environment into another. And I do feel that this digital world is extremely new. And I think we need some standards like we developed in the physical world. We already see it around accessibility. So if you're building software, it has to be available and accessible to people who are partially sighted, hearing impaired, disabled. And we need to think about standards like that in the physical world.
Well, there's a couple of threads I want to pull on there. Firstly, the blurring of the workplace and the home space, and whether that is a good thing if it combats isolation, but on the other hand, if it's a bad thing if we're always on. And also perhaps if the other two panelists could pick up on whether if we get used to a lower level of perhaps security or a laxness in using a particular program in our private life, does that spill over into something in political life or in the workplace?
Well, I think that word workplace is a very modern word. It's really since the Industrial Revolution have we had workplaces. Before that, it was workers, and the work was where the worker was, and it wasn't till maybe had scribes before the Industrial Revolution, but most of them were monks then. And I think we've gone through that phase of having working in offices, and we're coming out the other side now. And I think I would rather, instead of looking at workplace, look at worker. And how is that person working? Who is that person working with? And how are they achieving their work? And the technology is just another tool. It may be like the pen and ink. It's the next step on from that, and how we design that to enable the person to do the work that they're employed to do is key to that, and how we treat them as management right down to the new intake is quite an interesting sort of thought. So I would rather we moved away from the workplace. Difficult when we're in big institutions like the Commission and the Parliament, but actually start thinking about the worker and how can we make that work, that worker work more effectively.
Yeah, I agree. At the same time, we need to make sure that the workplace remains attractive. At the Ministry of Transport, as I said, we had 3 days per week teleworking possible. But on average, people were taking only 1 day. Fundamentally because they like to come to the office. They wanted to see people. You know, we should not forget that working is not just about producing things. It's also mainly about social contacts. So create the right atmosphere and people will come and will be happy to come, and the risk of isolation will be small. On the other hand, you need also to respect their time when they're off. That means, for example, refraining yourself to send emails very late at night, or making them feel like you expect an immediate answer, even on the weekend. So also create within the workplace time or moments where people can really cut off. For example, at the ministry also, we initiated a program of meditation for anybody who wanted to join, and we had a lot of people coming. It was just great, and this created this peacefulness which helped us to feel better.
Well, I mean, you mentioned this freedom to switch off. I mean, in France, there's been a law allowing people to do just that. Do we need those sorts of laws?
I'm just wondering how the media would deal with MEPs going to meditate. I think, you know, there's a lot of fun to be had with that. As attractive as it sounds, I mean, when I get on the Eurostar to go home, I'm sort of, here's my reading for the Eurostar. I meditate an awful lot on the train. I have to say, I do. My eyes come down and I read it with my eyes shut. But it is really important to the horrible phrase, think outside the box. But yes, there are reasons. We are social animals. We like to come to work. We like to have a purpose in our life. And for those people who are working, and it's a really important point that you say, because everything is so interconnected, WhatsApp and Twitter and emails work wherever you are now. It used to be that if you haven't got Wi-Fi at home, you didn't get those messages. Everybody has it now. And I will think of things over the weekend, and if I don't write them down or send a message on them, then I will forget them or even lose the piece of paper if I write it on a piece of paper. So I have to make sure that my staff don't do that. Don't say, oh, Catherine wants us to do something now, because then that it just infects the whole office and we all get burnout. So have your rules in your office and make sure that they're around the place. We're all looking at screensavers on our things. Have those sorts of sensible messages maybe on the screensavers, on the server, so that we get those messages. How do we can have all the good ideas that we like here and plan for the workplace. If we're not telling the people who are doing the working, then we're going to miss that trick. So make sure that whatever good ideas come out from here, we get those to the people who are actually having to use those ideas.
I mean, all I would say is that we're forgetting that there's an awful lot of people who don't ever come to an office, and their work doesn't involve them in coming to an office. And I do wonder whether we're a bit too attached to what's been produced through the Industrial Revolution, which are centralized places where people come to work. They were a construct of the Industrial Revolution, which started over 200 years ago. And we don't know what the digital revolution is going to produce, but perhaps it's going to produce places where people can get a bit of European Commission close to where they live, rather than having to travel with all the environmental and problems that come with that. The CEO of Accenture said that, and they've got 330,000 people, he said our workplaces, our physical workplaces are tactically useful and strategically irrelevant. And I wonder whether work has actually, just to kind of, in a way, build on your idea, Catherine, of that we need to focus on workers, that work has actually left the office, and that work is something that we do, not somewhere we go. Let's create the places that can give us that social interaction, but it might not be where those places are located at the moment.
Did you want to pick up on this?
Well, in that regard, I agree. We set up satellite offices all across Belgium in order to facilitate for people to go and work close to home and still find colleagues. So you're right.
A real job for the town planners and the architects for the future.
Yes.
But
If
it's
we're all
also
going to be moving and
it's
living
got
and working.
economic benefits for areas where people live, the idea of community, of even kind of local, government and autonomy. So I think there's a lot of mileage in it, but not if you're just spending all of your resources fashioning the offices you've already always had.
Okay, well, just to be a little bit provocative, it's not quite relevant to this room, but we're finally sort of reaching the end. I mean, are we in danger of creating our own little echo chamber here where we think everyone works like us? This is a very first world, white, middle class issue we're talking about, and not everyone has the opportunity to meditate in the office because they're not in an office, they're elsewhere. I mean, and what sort of a new workplace do we need to think about for those engaging with the EU institutions who aren't part of our echo chamber?
One of the more interesting facts I learned this year is that globally, more people have mobile phones than have access to clean toilets. So it's out there already. Everybody has that technology, and how we're going to make that work for them is the real challenge. It's a two-way process. They should be telling us how we design technology to help them in their daily lives, and they will vote with their feet or with their purses. They will buy the bit of kit that gives them the best experience, the best help for them in their work. It's already moved out of the office. Everybody has something in their pocket that connects to the rest of the world. If we want to ask a question, so many times we think, oh, I used to go to books to look for questions and get something at the encyclopedia off the shelf. That was old answers to old questions. Now, if anybody has ever asked that question, it'll be there on the internet, and we can look it up and find the answer. The answer might not be what we want, and it might not be the truth and honest one, but it's all out there much faster. So it is already out there. We just have to make sure that the job that we have to do, and that is in this context of helping organize the European Union, fits the purpose for the citizens of the European Union, the 500 million people out there that look to these institutions to make their lives work a lot better.
Very briefly, I mean, I don't want to be presented as just a promoter of meditation, but remember, Steve Jobs did not allow his children to have iPads. Most buses of Silicon Valley send their children to schools where there are no technological devices. There is a very simple reason for this. The big challenge of our times, and especially for our children, is attention. To be able to concentrate on something for more than 1 minute. It's crazy, but it's it's a very serious issue. And when you say, not everybody's got the luxury to meditate, well, I don't know. meditate doesn't cost anything. You don't need anything to do it. You can do it anywhere, anytime. It's just, and you know, you don't even need to sit in a lotus position. You just have to breathe deeply and be present. So it's very simple. But somehow, a lot of people are forgetting this. And unfortunately, we make very bad decisions when we are not connected anymore. And then they are very, very costly.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just something to think about relative to this is that there's 3.2 billion people connected on the planet at the moment. Within the next 5, or certainly within the next 10 years, all 7 point whatever it is will be connected. They will all have devices. They'll come online with powerful levels of internet speed, and that has to be an opportunity. It's an unprecedented moment when it happens. And the amount of knowledge and education that's available, irrespective of your own wealth. You'll be able to meditate, good, and you'll be able to connect to all human knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just connected. I didn't mean connected to the web, connected to yourself and to others. And social media is not a way to be connected to others.
Well, I think that does set us up nicely for our panel, which is after the coffee break, when I'm sure we'll be talking about common spaces as part of digital democracy. But before you put down your microphone, I want 3 words from each of you that will sum up what you want, your ideal for the workplace of the future.
For me, it's about digital literacy, that we treat becoming literate digitally as essential as all the other literacies, and raise our digital IQ.
Okay, that's more than 3 words. Kevin.
I want iTech, the IT in my pocket on my lap to help me with my work. So it has to assist in the work that I'm doing, whether I'm in a place or moving about. And I want it to be fast. Sorry. Yeah, and I want it to switch off, I suppose, when I need to.
Okay.
Trust, purpose, and progress.
Okay.